This is the podcast, New Heights, hosted by Jason and Travis Kelce, brothers and two of the most recognizable figures in professional football. Together, they co-host the New Heights podcast where they blend sports insight, humor, and stories from their lives, making them popular on and off the field.
This is the auditor, Chris Creary, host of I Made a Podcast, Faith Fight Podcast, and Podcast Production Labs. He's looking into this podcast to understand why it's been so successful and what he can learn from it. What you're about to hear is real. The podcasts are not clients, at least not yet. These are real shows created by real hosts being put under the microscope. Each episode, one podcast steps in, gets fully broken down, evaluated, and challenged across content, structure, and growth. No guessing, no sugarcoating, just honest insight on what's working, what's not, and what it's going to take to level up. This is where podcasts get better or get exposed. Welcome to the Podcast Audit.
Welcome to I Made a Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Creary, and today we're going deep on one of the most popular podcasts that's out right now, one of the most dominant shows out there in sports podcasting. It's the New Heights podcast with Jason and Travis Kelce. Now, before you say, sure, but they're already famous, I want to challenge that thinking straight from the top. Because fame isn't a head start. It's not a guarantee. There are plenty of celebrities with failed podcasts. There are athletes who tried this and absolutely went nowhere. But the Kelce brothers did something different and they built something intentional. And if you're a podcaster at any level, whether you have 100 listeners or 100,000 listeners, there's something in this show that you can borrow and adapt and apply to your own work. So let's get into it. I did a full audit of this podcast and I'm going to break down what they got right and where they have room to grow. And most importantly, I'm going to share what lessons you can walk away with today. So let's get into this episode. First of all, we're going to talk about the origin story, how New Heights got here. So New Heights launched in 2022 and it's hosted by brothers Jason and Travis Kelce. Jason was a dominant center for the Philadelphia Eagles at the time, and Travis was a perennial All-Pro with the Kansas City Chiefs, and both brothers have Super Bowl rings and they have Hall of Fame careers, and they decided to start this podcast. At the surface, that sounds like a network executive's dream pitch, but here is what a lot of people miss. The show didn't start massive, it grew, and it grew because of one thing above everything else: authenticity. And I know you've heard that word before, but it is extremely important. These two are not performing a version of themselves for the cameras. What you hear in the New Heights podcast is genuinely what it sounds like when Jason and Travis talk. The debates are real, the inside jokes are real, the stories are real, and audiences can tell the difference between a podcast that is produced to feel real and one that actually is real. And by the time I did this audit, the New Heights podcast has over 200 episodes, and it has established itself as one of the top sports entertainment podcasts in the world. It's on all of the major podcasts and apps, it's on YouTube, and every major platform that you can name. They've landed elite guests, athletes, entertainers, cultural figures, and they've built one of the most recognizable fan communities in all of podcasting. So let's talk about the structure and their content. So in our audit, the content and structure section, it scored a 9.6 out of 10. That is exceptional. And when you look at what's driving that score, it comes down to a few key decisions that the show makes consistently. First, clarity of purpose. This show earned a perfect 10 in this category, and rightfully so. Every episode of the New Heights podcast exists for the same reason: NFL insights, sports commentary, brotherly banter, and premium celebrity interviews. That's it. They know what they are, they lean into it every single week, and they never try to be something that they're not. That clarity is more powerful than most podcasters realize. When a listener knows what to expect and consistently gets it, they come back for more. Consistency of purpose builds loyalty, and loyalty is the currency of podcasting. Second, the episode structure. Every episode follows the same reliable format: an intro, current events and NFL discussion, a guest segment, fan questions, and sponsored reads. That repeatable structure does two things. It makes production more efficient and it makes the listener experience more comfortable. When your audience doesn't have to figure out what's happening, they can just relax and enjoy the ride. And the third thing that it does well is storytelling. This is where the show earns a perfect 10. Now, the Kelce brothers are genuinely gifted storytellers. Their shared history creates a natural narrative that doesn't need to be scripted. You don't have to create chemistry, they just have it because they've shared this experience together. And the personal stories that they tell gives fans some insight into the life of the NFL players, and no beat reporter or highlight reel can ever provide that perspective that they share on their podcast. And here's a lesson for all of you as podcasters. You may not have a brother who is a Super Bowl champion, but you do have stories. You have a perspective. You have things that you've lived through that nobody else has. And that is your version of the Kelce chemistry. Find it and use it in your podcast. Now, the show scores a perfect 10 for guest selection. And this is where the celebrity factor is very real. Travis's relationship with Taylor Swift brought a wave of new listeners who would have probably never known the show existed otherwise. But what keeps the guests coming back is the quality of the conversation. Great guests return because the host knows how to interview, how to listen, and how to create an environment where the guests can actually shine. Now, the next section is audio quality and production. Now, the production section scores 8.8 out of 10. And this is interesting because New Heights is not a studio-only show. Large portions of the podcast are actually recorded remotely, sometimes across different cities during the NFL season. Yet the audio quality is consistently professional. What does this tell us? This tells us that sound quality is a choice, not just circumstance. Good microphones, good acoustic treatments, and good editing can make a remote recording sound broadcast ready. The show invests in that. And the result is that listeners never get pulled out of the conversation by a distracting audio hiccup or a distorted sound or something that the microphones or the room picked up that wasn't intended to be in the episode. Now, the music and the sound design scored an 8 out of 10, and this is the only category in this section that is not in the 9s, and honestly, that is intentional. The sonic branding of the show is minimal because the show knows that the assets are Jason and Travis. They don't need sonic bells and whistles to hold your attention. The personalities are their production value. Now, episode lengths, it's pretty long. Some episodes go for an hour or 2 hours, and that's a wide range. And for different podcasts, it might be a liability. But for the New Heights audience, it has demonstrated that they'll stay tuned for the full ride because the conversation earns their trust and the listeners will stay engaged for the entire time. Now, the key word here is it earns the trust. Now, long episodes only work when every segment is delivering value. And on this show, the combination of laughs, insights, and access, it does that consistently all the time. So for your podcast, what is the right length? The honest answer is as long as it needs to be and not a minute longer. So if you're at 45 minutes with your podcast and you're running out of things to say, don't pad it to an hour and just say random things. Your audience can feel when your content is being stretched, so respect their time and they'll reward you with loyalty. Now, the next section is branding. The Kelce name is their asset. The branding section scored 9.5 out of 10. And this is where the show demonstrates something that every podcaster needs to understand. Your brand is everything. And that happens before someone actually hits play. It attracts the people to listen to your podcast. The title New Heights is simple, aspirational, and perfectly tied to the Kelce brand. It references football success, it suggests ambition, it works across contexts, sports, entertainment, self-improvement, and that's a title doing a lot of work in just 2 words. The cover artwork earns a 9.10 and it's instantly recognizable, professional, and built around the faces of Jason and Travis, and the episode titles are another standout. They consistently use celebrity names, trending topics, or curiosity-driven hooks. And this is a searchability strategy built into the title itself. When you put a recognizable name in the episode title, you are reaching a new audience that probably won't even know you existed if you didn't do that. But what really drives the 9.5 score is consistency. The New Heights brand shows up the same way across YouTube, social media, merchandise, and every podcast platform. There's no mixed messaging, no design drift, no identity confusion. When you see that cover art, you know exactly what you're getting. And ask yourself this question. If someone saw your podcast artwork in a lineup of hundreds of shows, would they stop? Would they remember it? Would it communicate in one sentence what your podcast is actually about? If the answer is no, that's where you need to invest some time and do some more thinking before you even start to go into anything else. Now, the next section is publishing and distribution. Now, they scored a perfect 10 out of 10 here, and I wanted to spend some time here because this is the section where most aspiring podcasters fall short. Not because of lack of talent, but because of lack of discipline. New Heights releases every Wednesday, week after week. During the NFL season, during the off season, regardless of what's happening in the world of professional football, that schedule is a promise, and every time they keep it. They reinforce trust with their audience. And think about podcasts you've given up on. Most of them didn't lose you with bad content. They lost you when they disappeared for 3 weeks without explanation and then came back like nothing happened. Inconsistency tells your audience that the show is not a priority for you and it stops being a priority for them. Now, New Heights also scores a perfect 10 for back catalog health. With over 200 episodes available, that's amazing. A deep back catalog means that every new listener who discovers a show has hundreds of hours of content to explore. It causes binge listening, and it's a very real growth driver. And it only exists if you are consistent time after time after time to release episodes. On the distribution side, the show is everywhere that it needs to be. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, full presence across the ecosystem, and show notes are detailed. Searchability is excellent. And the only area where it scored below a 9 in this section were transcripts, and it was rated at a 7 out of 10. Now, not every episode has transcripts, and that is an accessibility gap, and it's also an SEO gap. Transcripts gives search engines more text to index, which means more organic discovery. And this is a low-cost, high-value upgrade that any podcast can implement today. Now, the next section in this podcast audit is audience and community. Now, this section, the podcast scored 9.5 out of 10. And the centerpiece of this score is something that many podcasts hope to achieve one day, but they never actually do it. It's a true fan community with its own identity. The 92 percenters. That's the name of their fan base. Now, when your audience has a name, they have an identity. When they have an identity, they have ownership. And when they have ownership, they do something that no marketing budget can ever buy. They become evangelists for your show. The social media strategy is elite. Clips, reels, shorts, and viral moments. The New Heights team understands that the podcast itself is the anchor, but social media is the engine that drives discovery. They don't just upload episodes and then hope that people will find them. They create shareable moments intentionally. They understand that for most new listeners, the first exposure to the show won't be through a podcasting app. It'll be through a 60-second clip on Instagram or on TikTok. Now, listener feedback scored a 10 out of 10 with thousands of reviews and an active vocal fan base. Now, that type of engagement doesn't happen by accident. It happens when a show treats its audience as participants in something, not just consumers of something. Now, one area where there's room for growth is email list integration. And you probably have heard me say this before. With a score of 7 out of 10, this is the same gap that exists in many high-profile shows out there, and they lean heavily on the social media platforms for distribution. Email is the only channel that you actually own. The algorithms can change, the platforms rise and fall, but an email list is yours. And the most forward-thinking thing that New Heights could do right now, and the most forward-thinking thing any podcaster who wants to grow their podcast can do, is build their email list intentionally. So the next section of this podcast audit is on monetization. Now, the New Heights podcast scores a perfect 10 out of 10 here, and this is where New Heights separates itself from other good podcasts, and it enters the territory of a true media business. They have premium sponsors, ad inventories, live events, memberships, licensing deals, book promotions, merchandise. The show doesn't just sell ads, it builds an entire commercial ecosystem that touches every part of the audience relationship. Every touch point is a potential revenue stream. And here is what makes this possible: trust. The audience trusts Jason and Travis. So when they recommend something, it lands differently than a generic pre-roll ad at the beginning of your podcast. That trust was built episode by episode by episodes through consistent delivery of value. The content is the seed and the monetization is the harvest. So as you continue to plant the seed of your content over and over and over, the harvest of that is that you'll be able to monetize your audience as you build the trust, just like how Jason and Travis have built trust with their audience. Now, for podcasters earlier on in the journey, you don't need to build a multi-stream empire right now, but you do need to be thinking about it. What does your version of a media business look like? What is the thing that you can offer your audience that extends beyond the feed, beyond the course, beyond the community? A live event, maybe you could start small with a version of that. So this is something that you can think about as podcasters. Now, section number 8 of the podcast audit is where New Heights has a lot of room to grow. Now, no show is perfect, not even one that scores a 9.3, and some shows do come close. And the most honest thing that I can do as someone who reviews podcasts and studies them deeply is show you that even the best show has vulnerabilities. The first weakness is structure. It's heavily reliant on host personalities. New Heights, as it currently exists, does not work without Jason and Travis. The show is them. If one or both of them step away from the show for any reason, the audience has no reason to return. That is the real risk for a media business. The strongest media brands eventually build an identity that transcends the individual personalities, and New Heights hasn't needed to deal with this problem yet, but eventually they will get to that place where they need to figure out what they're going to do. Now, the second is accessibility. We've already talked about the transcripts, but it's worth repeating. A 7 out of 10 in transcripts availability means that there are people who want to engage with the content that can't. There's an audience being left on the table. Because what if there are people who are blind, or if they can't hear, but they like to read it? They are actually missing out by not getting the transcripts. And the third thing is episode length. 60 to 120 minutes works for the core audience, but it's a real barrier for casual discovery. If someone is new to the show and they see a 90-minute episode in their feed on a Tuesday morning, they might not start it. A best of show or a clip show where they just highlight the key parts from various episodes, it can help greatly for those people who want to just get a taste, who are just finding the podcast and they want to get a taste about what this podcast is actually about. This might be a suggestion. So Jason, Travis, if you're listening, your podcast is long, but if you clip it up and create maybe a 30-minute episode of the best parts of every single episode and release that every now and then as a podcast episode, it can help more people discover your podcast, and eventually they'll get to the place where they'll listen to a full 2-hour episode. Now, the fourth thing is the off-season challenge. Now, during the NFL off-season, the show's natural content engine runs at a lower power. Some episodes feel less focused without the weekly game day news cycle and the anchor conversations, and this is actually an opportunity for developing evergreen content pillars that can anchor episodes regardless of what's going on in the sports calendar. So story-driven deep dives, personal history episodes, and life and business conversations, context that doesn't need a Sunday box score to exist. So the final section of the podcast audit is lessons. What does this mean for your podcast today? So what can we take away from this? What does a 9.3 podcast out of 10 teach us that we can apply into our own podcasts? Lesson number 1, chemistry is currency. The most valuable thing on New Heights is not the guest roster, not the production value, not the distribution deals. It's the relationships between Jason and Travis. The authenticity can't be manufactured. Your version of this is the genuine perspective, your voice, your story that only you have. So don't perform on your podcast, just be yourself on your podcast. Lesson number 2 is structure creates freedom. Because the format is consistent, the brothers can take the conversation anywhere with it. They don't need to worry about structure, the structure handles itself. When your listeners know exactly what to expect, you spend less energy on logistics and more on the actual conversation. Lesson number 3 is show up every week. The perfect 10 in publishing consistency is not glamorous, it doesn't make highlight reels, but it is the single most powerful thing that you can do to build a sustainable podcast. Every week that you show up is a deposit into your audience's trust bank. Now, lesson number 4 is build community, not just an audience. The 92 percenters are not just listeners, they're members. They have an identity, they belong to something. That sense of belonging is what turned a download number into a movement. Lesson number 5 is own your audience. Social media and streaming platforms are borrowed land. Email is your foundation. Whatever stage you're at in building your email list, even 500 people who gave you their email address is worth more than 50,000 followers on a platform that can change its algorithm tomorrow. And lesson number 6 is think beyond the episode. New Heights is not a podcast with a website. It's a media company with a podcast at its center. Books, live events, memberships, merchandise. The episode is the beginning of the relationship, not the end of it. What comes after the episodes for your listeners? What can you build that deepens the connection? So the New Heights podcast scored a 9.3 out of 10, and they earned it. They earned it through consistency, authenticity, community, strategic thinking, and understanding that the best podcast is the one that makes the listeners feel like they are part of something. You don't need to be an NFL star to apply any of these principles. You need clarity of purpose. You need a disciplined schedule. You need a genuine voice. And you need the willingness to show up every single week, even when the audience feels small, even when the algorithm is against you, even when you're not sure anyone is listening. But they are listening, and they are waiting to find a show just like yours. And that's a wrap of this episode of I Made a Podcast. I hope that you learned something because I went through a lot in this episode, and I hope that you made notes. Now, if this podcast gave you value, share it with a fellow podcaster who needs to learn and maybe apply some of the things that we talked about in this episode. Remember to subscribe on whichever podcast app that you're using to listen to this, or on YouTube. Leave a review, leave a comment, and remember the best time to start a podcast was actually 10 years ago. The second best time is right now. So go ahead and make it happen, and you'll hear from me again next week on I Made a Podcast. Peace.